I often see people talk about dark and controversial movies and say things like, wow, that was a really good movie, that I never want to watch again. And I've always disagreed with that. If a movie is well made and disturbing, why wouldn't you rewatch it? Personally, I rewatch movies because they're compelling and not because they're comfortable. For instance, Threads, which I made a video about on this channel, is a brutally realistic depiction of a nuclear war. It's one of the hardest movies to sit through, and yet it has become one of my favorites. I've rewatched it 1,000 times, not because it's disturbing, but because it is very, very important, especially during these times. One of my favorite kinds of videos are iceberg videos. You know, the ones that use the iceberg metaphor to dive into a topic layer by layer, starting with surface level facts and going deeper into obscure, disturbing stuff. There are tons of iceberg videos out there about dark and disturbing movies, but no matter who makes them, one title always shows up: Irreversible. After watching it for the first time, Irreversible is the only movie that actually made me question my stance about dark movies. I definitely won't watch it again because of how good it was at being extremely disturbing. And I'm not the only one who thought that way, because at the Cannes Film Festival, 200 people walked out of it looking shocked and disturbed. But the question is it disturbing just for the sake of it? Or is there something really deeper going on? And in today's video, we're gonna explore how two things can be true at once. Hello, and welcome to the channel. Gaspar Noé, born in 1963, is an Argentinian-Italian movie director who moved to France with his parents when he was 12 years old. He pursued philosophical studies and cinema in the Louis Lumière Art School, where he got his degree at 19 years old. Before Irreversible, Gaspar Noé had already made waves with his debut, Seul contre tous, or I Stand Alone, a grim, angry character study about a butcher descending into madness. The film won him critical attention at Cannes and even some unlikely fans, Vincent Cassel and Monica Bellucci. When they met in 1999, they told Noé how much they loved his work. The three of them started bouncing around ideas for a new film, but nothing stuck. Until Noé, inspired by Memento, proposed a story told entirely in reverse. They were in. The only problem is that they had just 6 weeks to shoot the whole thing before Bellucci had to leave for the Matrix sequels. Irreversible is a revenge movie, and unlike any other revenge movies out there, this one does not give you the satisfaction you usually get. By flipping the chronological order, it drops the viewer directly in a violence that they cannot understand. It feels senseless because you witness the consequences before the cause. Each long sequence that follows shows what happened earlier. According to Gaspar, this process allows the viewer to reach a fake happy ending. He said, and I quote, "Emotionally, it's a happy ending, but rationally, it's not." Structuring a movie backwards completely reshapes the viewer's relationship with time, memory, and cause and effect. In a traditional linear film, events unfold in a cause-to-effect rhythm, where action leads to consequence. But in reverse storytelling, the effect comes first and the cause is gradually revealed, which adds layers of dramatic irony and emotional weight. You're not only watching a story, you're constantly re-evaluating it. Each new scene reframes what you've already seen, creating a sense of disorientation that can mimic real-life memory, trauma, or grief. Directors like Nolan use this to align us with characters experiencing fractured memory, like in Memento, where we only understand as much as the protagonist does. For Tarantino, it's about controlling pacing and impact. Presenting moments out of order lets him maximize tension, humor, or tragedy. In Irreversible, the reverse structure is a moral weapon. It makes the violence more unbearable by forcing us viewers to see the consequences first and then dragging us backwards into innocence. By the end, or rather the beginning, what would have been a calm opening scene suddenly feels devastating precisely because we know what comes after. The film opens in a dingy hotel room. One of them is the butcher from Gaspar Noé's I Stand Alone. He casually mentions he went to prison for disturbing acts involving his daughter. It's a dark and deliberate callback, a subtle way of building continuity across films and setting the tone for the kind of meta-layered provocative storytelling Noé is known for. The story follows Alex, played by Monica Bellucci, who spends an evening out with her current boyfriend, Marcus, played by Vincent Cassel, and her ex, Pierre, played by Albert Dupontel. There's a strange tension between the two men, masked by playful banter, but the night takes a dark turn. After an argument, Alex decides to head home alone and is brutally assaulted in a tunnel. What follows is a chaotic, rage-fueled search for the attacker, a man known as Le Ténia. In the frenzy, Pierre ends up unaliving someone, only it's not the right person. The real culprit stands there and watches an innocent man get beaten up to a pulp. Special effects are very good for the time. Seeing a man getting his head brutally smashed with a fire extinguisher 22 times with no cuts is very realistic and successfully convey how anger and revenge can be contagious, because at the end of the day, no matter how anger-fueled Marcus was, it was Pierre, the person who was pretty rational and cooperative, who ends up unaliving who he thought was the one who abused his ex-girlfriend Alex. The camera continuously swirls and seesaws about to complete the nausea and confusion. The deliberate use of the color red throughout symbolizes the blinding rage and anger Marcus was feeling. The droning soundtrack playing adds another level of nausea and discomfort. But now is the time to talk about one of the most horrifying scenes in movie history. After arguing with Marcus, Alex decides to leave and go home. She tries to get a taxi at a very busy street, but a bystander innocently tells her to take the underpass because it's dangerous to do it there. Little did she know, the actual danger lies underneath. The way this sequence is filmed is noticeably different from the beginning. Gaspar ditched the haphazard camera movements and opted for a more controlled, fluid long sequence instead. I believe it's his way to prepare the viewers for what it's about to unfold. The camera always stays behind Alex as we see her walking down the stairs and enter a long red corridor. An ominous sensation fills the air as we see in the distance a man fighting with a prostitute, the same one who told Marcus where Le Ténia was. So we can assume that that man is Le Ténia. He notices Alex and goes after her instead, immediately hates her because she's dressed up in fancy clothes. He automatically assumes she's from the elite rich people of Paris. He channels that anger in a way that can only be described as the most cruel, bestial, and vile a human is capable of. What comes next is a raw, one-shot sequence of Alex being brutally by Le Ténia for 9 minutes. Instead of being behind Alex, the camera is now facing her, making us viewers feel involved in the violence that we helplessly witness, as if we are complicit. This sequence is extremely hard to watch, and unlike the faceless figure in the distance whom we briefly see stumbling upon and choosing to walk away, we are forced to watch. Gaspar is punishing the viewer for their passive role and their morbid curiosity. During the premiere of the movie in the Cannes Film Festival, attendees stormed out of the theater when this scene started playing. People called it scandalous, outrageous, shocking, pointless, and understandably so. Around 20 people fainted or had panic attacks that evening. Some of them actually had to be given oxygen in the lobby. What follows next are the events that led to Alex leaving the party. Marcus doesn't really pay attention to her and flirts with other women, despite their relationship being shown as close and intimate, especially considering that we later find out Alex was pregnant. The last scene, or chronologically the first, shows Alex reading an experiment with time, while people relax in the park and children play nearby. It creates a sense of false hope and resolution, because Alex has no idea what's about to happen to her. But as viewers, we know this day is not going to end well in retrospect. According to Gaspar Noé, the entirety of the film is improvised except for 2 scenes: the fire extinguisher scene and the scene where Monica's character got kicked in the head, which were thoroughly rehearsed. Gaspar wanted the movie to feel as authentic as possible. He even got his security team to say stuff on camera on their own accord. Monica Bellucci said in an interview that she didn't read a script because she didn't have any. All she had was 15 pages of the synopsis and the overall story, but the rest was all improvised while the cameras kept rolling for 20 minutes. But improvised doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't rehearsed. As far as the scene is concerned, Monica Bellucci had the upper hand. Gaspar Noé had no idea how long the scene was going to be because it wasn't actually him who directed it. It was Monica all along. The scene was actively rehearsed and shot 6 times over 2 days, each take being one shot from a fixed camera. It was meticulously crafted and choreographed so that she can be able to enact the scene from a place of total control. Many people ask about why it was so long. Gaspar said that is simply as long as it might last in real life. It was his mission to create a movie as real as possible, so real in fact that the actor who played Alex's assailant, Joe Prestia, said that the scene was extremely demanding, both physically and emotionally. Many elements factored in that created a scene that is very well known in the cinema history because of how real it feels. The camera being placed directly in front of the scene playing out on the ground lowers the viewers to the same level of vulnerability Alex was feeling in that exact same moment. Whether it's the length, the choreographed movements, the absence of music, or Alex's screams for help, the entire scene perfectly captures the horror one might feel in a moment like that. What makes it even more real, in my opinion, is the man who we briefly see coming into the picture. As a viewer, we think he would be able to help her, but what most people fail to realize is that the bystander effect is more common than we can imagine. That figure probably didn't want to meddle in that situation. He probably assumed that someone else might be able to help her better than he could, or simply didn't care enough. And that's where the true horror resides: humans' inability to help strangers, not because they're evil, but because they hesitate, second guess, or disconnect. One of the reasons the infamous scene hits so hard, beyond the choreography, the fixed camera, or the silence, is because of who it's happening to. Monica Bellucci. In most films, she plays characters who feel larger than life, sophisticated, desired, and protected by the frame. But in Irreversible, all of that is stripped away, and that contrast between the way we're used to seeing her and what we're seeing now is disturbing. There's something profoundly unsettling about watching someone the world has placed on a pedestal suddenly rendered completely powerless. And that leads us to the big question: was it justified? Was there any valid artistic reason to show something this graphic, or was it just exploitation masqueraded as art? By now, Gaspar has already established himself as one of the primary figures of the new French extremity, which is a genre of French movies that were made at the turn of the 21st century that were considered extreme or transgressive. Amongst other things, Gaspar was accused of sensationalizing trauma, indulging in violence for shock value, and, unsurprisingly, misogyny. But he never backed down or apologized. In interviews, even decades later, he doubled down. He said the film was never meant to be entertaining, it was meant to be honest, to force the viewer to confront what cinema usually cuts away from. So, was it justified? Honestly, that depends on what you think the role of cinema is. If it's to entertain, to distract, to make you feel good, Irreversible is not your movie. But if cinema is also meant to disturb, to challenge, and to reflect back the worst parts of ourselves and the world we live in, then maybe it is. Maybe the very thing that made this film feel so unbearable is exactly what makes it necessary. That said, a lot of people strongly disagree. Some saw the camera work as lazy or amateurish. Others felt it was a random pile-up of violence with no emotional payoff, made by a director who only knows how to provoke, especially since this film came right after I Stand Alone, which was also very graphic and nihilistic. Critics started to feel like Noé was just repeating himself. Even the second half of Irreversible, where the part where things slow down, failed to convince everyone. For some, it felt too long, too self-serious, and others consider it to be a weak attempt at being poetic, loaded with stiff dialogue and a sentimental tone that didn't quite land after everything we'd just seen. To those people, Irreversible isn't transgressive or daring, it's just a cool film pretending to be deep. Irreversible got re-released in 2019 under the straight cut, where it followed the events chronologically this time. But whether it's the original or the straight cut, the point of Irreversible is that revenge is truly irreversible. The film begins with an act of horrifying revenge taken out on the wrong person, and it's only as we work our way backward from that act that we find out why. What it's not though, it's not the kind of revenge movies that gives viewers catharsis. When the culprit is found and the hero finally avenges what needed to be avenged, it never gives a sense of closure, and it forces the viewers to sit with the fact that nobody got their way. Well, except maybe Lutenia. Where the movie excels in creativity, lacks in storytelling though, because after the infamous scene, nothing that follows really had any substantial impact. Even if we learned that Alex was pregnant, there's nothing more to show for the story to make sense. And yet, the film goes on for a well 15 minutes or so after the scene. And to make it attractive, Bellucci's nudity is used again and again. Still, whether you think Irreversible is a masterpiece or a mess, it's undeniably one of the most disturbing films ever made. And for all its flaws, it has a clear, almost cruel vision that revenge, when blinded by rage, doesn't just fail to heal. Sometimes it destroys the wrong person entirely. If you like this video, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more content. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.